So what are the challenges that face the construction industry? Well, Rico Wojtulewicz is from the National Federation of Builders. Very good morning.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi there. So all these houses need to be built, and Will there thinks he'll be in a job for many years to come. What is the problem with the industry at the moment?
Well, the industry is dominated by the very largest builder. And why that's a problem is they typically subcontract on lowest price. So if you're a builder of any sort and you are looking for a piece of a job, you may only get that contract for whatever period it is. There's no pipeline for you. Now, roll back 20, 30 years where 38% of homes were built by, 38% of homes were built by small and medium-sized companies. Now it's 9%. Well, we had as many bricklayers, carpenters going through the apprenticeship route as we do entire construction apprenticeship sector today. And back in the 80s, when we had smaller companies building, they could afford to take on an apprentice. Now, the planning system for small and medium-sized companies is so hard that it might take you 18 months, 2 years, 3 years to get planning. So you can't afford to take on an apprentice to literally sit and do nothing. And whenever the government kind of runs these schemes, it's called what's called Section 106. When you sign a Section 106 agreement with the council, and one of those agreements might be you must take on X amount of apprentices. Well, in London particularly, and this is across the whole country, but it's really pronounced in London, a lot of people start their apprenticeships and then 9 months later they've got nowhere to go because that job has finished and they've no career output. That's why to solve this, not only to build the homes is you need more SMEs, small and medium-sized companies to build them, your local builders, but if you do that and enable them to win work and have a certainty of pipeline, they will naturally take on these apprentices and you'll have those conversions that were discussed earlier. That's
very interesting because I was wondering what the answer was to that. There's all these apprentices going through the college, students going through the college, and then the tutor there was saying only 30% will get apprenticeships. And I was thinking, well, why is that? So many homes need to be built, but it's because the small companies can't take them on. There's no certainty of work and they'll be just sitting around doing nothing, really. So what about the major companies? Are they taking on apprentices?
They do take on apprentices, but of course you need an apprenticeship that it takes 2 to 3 years to get your apprenticeship and then a couple of years to really gain the skills in order to perhaps take on the job yourself, not be supervised or start your own company, have that competency. And that's a long time if you're just subcontracting a few people. You need thousands and thousands to go through the system. And because 73% of apprentices that complete the course are trained by SMEs, small and medium-sized, local builders, then unless you have them winning work, it's impossible. And I think 80% start out with SMEs, but because SMEs keep dropping off a cliff, that's why the conversion rate is down to 73%. And another really important element is 90% of the trainers are also SMEs. And that means that if they get work subcontracted by the bigger companies, if they struggle as a business, they still can't retain and utilise those apprentices. And that's a major problem for the system. And it's one that perhaps we don't discuss enough because people just want to build houses. So they go, well, let's just grant loads of planning permissions. We don't ever discuss why they're being built and why that's important.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the 1.5 million. I mean, whether that many get built, it's certainly an ambitious target, even if it's not quite that number. And you're thinking, well, how quickly can this happen? Have we got the numbers in the industry to make these huge numbers of houses spring up all over the place? And I'm guessing you're saying we don't.
No, we absolutely don't. And there's another factor here that is never discussed. And that's why your conversation is so important, because I've been banging on about this for 10 years. And unfortunately, people haven't quite pieced together that skills pipeline means you can build the houses. But we've got 16.5 million homes that were built before we had building regulations in 1965. And we've got around 12.5 million that were traditionally built, so bricks and mortar. So some people say, well, let's just have loads of modern methods, off-site housing. No, because unless we're going to knock down 6.5 million homes, and it's probably more like 18 million when you incorporate all the other homes, who's going to maintain those buildings in the future? Who's going to retrofit them? So there's always going to be work in the construction industry, but also modern methods of construction. If you're just building off-site, it's got the same problems as we've just discussed. It's a few big companies building stuff off-site. Maybe the quality isn't as good yet. It doesn't mean it won't be. It might be in the future. But what you need is all the different methods. So you might crane in like a roof truss or a floor, a concrete floor. That's still modern methods of construction, but you can blend it with more the traditional approaches. And that then means you're still keeping the industry going and not limiting it to a few companies who, if they go under, everything stops. And that's why housing delivery has gone from a peak of 244,000 down to around, well, we're looking at 160, 170. And actually a bit of that is because of the planning system. So we really need to understand that we need to build homes, but we need certainty, but it's who builds and why. And I don't just mean market houses, we need all types of housing.
Yeah. And so with those houses, that's the 16.5 million that you mentioned, are you saying it's the maintenance of those houses that also needs to be done as well as building the new houses?
Maintenance and retrofitting, so making them more energy efficient to meet our climate targets. The government set these targets in place, so we have no choice now but to meet them by 2050. And that's a huge amount of work. I just did a kind of back of the fag packet. Best case scenario, we're looking at around £2 trillion to retrofit every building in the UK to the standard of high energy efficiency. So you need to somehow bring those costs down. So if you're going to be obsessed with the biggest companies just knocking stuff out, well, you're not going to provide all the solutions. And it's the solutions that are the things that reduce prices for consumers and also create innovation. That's what this country has to focus on. Unless we've got a politician that says, I'm happy to knock down 16.5 million homes. But I think we all know that is never going to happen.
Unlikely, I would say. Yeah. Okay. I think we've got a sense of the scale of the issue now. And so I'm sure we'll talk again about this. Really interesting. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the platform. It's really important discussion. It's amazing that you've bothered to have this conversation because so few people understand the complexity.